So our first day is coming to an end. I hope you enjoyed as much as we have. Now, our last but not the least speaker and dear friend, Olaf Lewitz. Olaf is an agile guru. He is one of around 100 certified enterprise coaches of the Scrum Alliance in the world. He has over 15 years of experience in agile. He's also a co-founder of the TrustTemenos Leadership Academy. He works with leaders increasing their clarity of identity and attention. He helps growing organizations where safe spaces are available for people to show up and grow. So hi Olaf and welcome.
Hi Elena.
Hi, what do you say about the introduction? Did you like it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not so sure about the guru, but...
Oh, we are sure, don't be modest. Okay, so Olaf is going to talk about emotions. That's a very tough topic that you've chosen. I don't know, are you aware of that? But one of the toughest one. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're very looking forward to this. So I encourage you people to use the opportunity to ask questions to Olaf during the Q&A section in Match About. So we will try 5 to 10 minutes before the end of the session to answer your questions. So Olaf, the floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the introduction. And if anyone has a question in between and you see it, feel free to just put it in there.
Okay, good.
So first, and the previous event like this, Agile Serbia was the conference called, I talked about an engineer's way to become an agile leader. And this introduction into emotions also has an engineer perspective. Something's odd with my slide. Does it work?
Yeah, it works now.
Okay. I also don't hear you very well, but as long as you hear me, that's fine. So this is a bit like an introduction to emotions for engineers by an engineer, so to say. Over the years, I've read a lot, I've talked a lot with people about emotions, I've studied a lot, did a lot of self-development, and this is my perspective. So who am I? Most of this you already said. About 8 years ago, I became independent, boldly labeled myself the trust artist because I somehow had a hunch or a knack for creating trust, building trust, figured out how that works in the first years. I've been an enterprise coach for, it feels like ever, but it's like 7 years, I think. Certified Agile Leadership Educator about since that program existed. And yeah, I've done Agile since before it was called that. I think it's definitely more than 15 years now. Could be modest about my age, but I'm more than 50, and I started programming with XP in '98. So it's definitely a long time. And yeah, let's start with the topic. So why talk about emotions? Why do we have emotions? What do we want to talk about? What do we want to do with them? How do we embrace them, use them? I heard a great metaphor recently by a friend of mine, and she said, for some people, their emotions are like they're standing on the fence of a big, let's say prairie or some meadow, and a beautiful horse is running around that meadow, and some people like watch their emotions from afar. And then she said, and other people, they're trying to mount the horse, and they have this horse under them, and they feel the power, they feel the energy, they feel how fast it could run, but they don't really dare to engage it. They don't really dare to run with it. They don't really dare to let it flow, let it carry them. They don't dare to use the energy. And that metaphor summarizes quite nicely why I'm addressing this topic. We're losing so much, specifically as leaders, but not only as leaders, if we don't understand emotions. Our society has this way of repressing emotions, embarrassing emotions, shaming emotions, And yeah, that's not healthy and not helpful. We treat emotions as if God invented them to embarrass us, and that's stupid. We share most of the emotions we have, maybe even all of them, with some animals, at least the primates. We share many emotions with most animals, like even lobsters have a sense of connection to others and share the same neurochemicals in their brain for basic emotional drives. So what is an emotion? What are emotions? Emotions are messages in our body, mostly in our brain, but not only in our brain. So something like chemicals, electricity, things our system tells us, things our body wants to let us know so that we pay attention to them. And they emerged over the millennia that we evolved to tell us certain things, like to move towards certain things or to stay away from certain things. To when we bite into something, we feel disgust, which is one of the strongest emotions we have, which tells us not to eat something. So they are messages that we can listen to or ignore at our own peril. And if we listen to them, if we tap into this information, which is basically is, then we can use it to our advantage. And what I want to introduce to you as a model or a way of thinking is to get a bit of a conceptual frame around how they work and how you can understand them and how you can train yourself to become better in emotional literacy, which I call the ability to tell several emotions apart and know what they're for and know how to use them. And also some emotional agility in the sense that you can move into an emotion and move out of it without getting stuck and without feeling pain. Talking about pain, some people say that emotions are painful or that some emotions are painful. That's actually not true. There are two things that can be painful related to emotions. And one is an emotion might point to pain in my life. So it might be a message that tells me about something painful. For instance, when I feel depression, that tells me that something in my life is very wrong. When I feel very angry, it tells me that something is very wrong, different kind of wrong. But again, a message that points to something painful. It's not the anger or the depressive emotion that is the pain. Another thing that causes pain when dealing with emotions is repressing them. It's a bit like having a pot on the cooking stove at full heat, and it's cooking with water inside it, and you press a lid onto it, right? You need increased pressure, and at some point it will just burst. And this is how repressing emotions works in our system. They find a way of coming out, sometimes through stomach problems, sometimes through cancer, sometimes through violence, sometimes through painful explosion. But it's not the emotion causing the pain, it's the way we deal with it. And what I'm trying to get to here, and what I'm trying to give you here is a way of working with emotions instead of working against them. Move from a state where we feel victims of our emotions to a way of not only feeling on top of them, but actually let them fuel our energy, let them flow through us so that we can be informed and powered by these emotions that we have. So first thing we need to know about emotions is they have a scale of different intensities. It sounds very obvious, but when you think about it, it has some consequences that are not obvious. Because the amount of conscious awareness on that scale that we usually have tends to be very, very slow. So there's this unconscious amount, the emotional intensity is low, and I'm not aware of it. So remember that I said emotions are messages in our body. So there are certain chemicals, certain electric currents in the brain, and they're always existing. Like they never stop, right? The chemicals that are activated when we get angry, they're always present in the body, that just the level gets higher when you get angry. So there's a level of anger present in our system, always. There is a level of sadness present in our system, always. It's just when we become conscious, when the intensity becomes higher, that then, this is the blue area on this little chart, when we become conscious of them, then we actually say we feel an emotion. So I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry. But does not mean that the system of sadness or the anger system in my body is not always active. And then when intensity gets even higher, and this is something that we probably all know, maybe from ourselves or from other people, then we get overwhelmed and we can't control ourselves. And that's what we are afraid of. And this is why we repress emotions, because we don't want to be overwhelmed. We don't want to be victims of our emotions. So there's something interesting about this conscious area in the middle. And there are basically two things you need to know. One is, this is an area you can deliberately grow. And it's quite easy. There's no pain involved because you don't need to work on the higher end where it's dangerous. You can work on the lower end, it automatically expands. So when you work on noticing sadness when you're not sad yet, you're noticing anger when you're not angry yet, and you work on this, and I'll tell you how in a few minutes, then your threshold of becoming overwhelmed by sadness, overwhelmed by anger also moves to the right, so that this area gets bigger. What that also tells us is that there's a possibility that you do not have a conscious area between the unconscious and the overwhelming. And maybe that's not you, maybe that's you years ago, or maybe that's somebody you know, or somebody you've seen in a movie, but you've definitely come across people at some point in your life where, for instance, when they get upset, they move from being totally unemotional, totally deadpan, totally quiet, to their fist is in your face within a millisecond. So they basically just switch from unconscious to overwhelmed. And that's not what we want to do because it's dangerous for us and other people. It's also not safe at work, especially if you're in some kind of leadership role. This is not how you want to show up. So this is why this work is so important, so that we can increase this conscious space where we are more literate, more fluent, more understanding of what happens, so that we can respond rather than react to our emotions. Two other things are important here. One, emotions are always true. They're not always right. If my door would slowly open and something big and yellow would come in next to me now, I would probably get afraid. And that fear would feel very real to me. And it would be stupid to ignore it. But unless it's really a lion coming into my room, there's no danger. That means the emotion is not right, but I'm feeling it and it's true. And it is a good thing to acknowledge this truth and then investigate. Does it make sense? Do I need to do something, etc.? So that's something important to remember. Another thing about this intensity, do not mix up the intensity of someone's feeling, of your own feeling, with the intensity of someone's expression of that feeling. Some people can speak with a loud voice and very conviction, and maybe they are very passionate about the topic and they are loud with their opinion. That does not necessarily mean they can't control themselves anymore. It does not necessarily mean they will hit you the next moment or they become violent in any other way. It just means that they have an emotion and they're expressing it. And the expression does not mean they're overwhelmed. Similar for tears. People have very different thresholds of when sadness or joy or any other deep emotion brings tears to their eyes. For some people, that's early and often. And for some people, like me, that's latent, rare. That does not mean that they are overwhelmed when they have tears. So there's a very important difference between recognizing your or someone's intensity of emotion. You can't necessarily see that from the outside, and recognize the intensity of their reaction, of their expression of that emotion. And this is especially important, and this is something that I should say probably, talking as a male about this topic, emotions and the way we deal with them, the way we are educated about them, the way we are supposed or not supposed to express them is a fairly gender biased topic. And I'm trying to be balanced in the way I present it, but it is necessarily biased from a male perspective. So for instance, men and women tend to be educated very differently in terms of understanding their emotions, talking about their emotions, expressing their emotions. Men and women are shamed for different emotions in different ways, not only in the workplace. This is a topic for another talk. I just want to bring this in so that we don't ignore it, because whenever we have conversations about emotions and there are men and women in the room, this is going to be a tension that needs to be acknowledged and brought into the shared awareness rather than, again, ignored and repressed. So let's do something practical, and let's do something and start with something that we do all the time anyway, which is breathing. And as I said, emotions are physical messages in your body. One of the things that your body does is breathing, and breathing is a thing that, at least if you look at the flow of oxygen through your system, is something that the whole body is involved in. So it's absolutely unsurprising that breathing is also involved with emotions. So one thing you can do, and this is beautiful now that we're not in one room and nobody needs to be embarrassed because you're just sitting in front of a screen, and hopefully you're alone and nobody's watching you. So you can follow what I'm doing without anyone watching you, without fearing to be embarrassed or to be embarrassing to anyone, I hope. And I'm not going to do anything loud here. So what I'm inviting you to do is to breathe out. Focus on your breathing out. And if you can, if you have that level of privacy or soundproof around you, breathe out with some voice, like or and what you notice is that on top of the air coming out of you, on top of letting go of the oxygen and some water, and probably, given today's times, also some viruses, you will also let go of something else. You will let go of something that was maybe on your mind, something that was in your body, something that was a little stuck, maybe a memory, maybe a thought that you just had, maybe a bad idea, maybe something you wanted to do instead of this talk, but now you're stuck here and you have to listen to me. So that's one of the most essential emotions, working out, one of the most essential emotions we have, the emotion that helps us let go of stuff. And when it becomes more intense, it will involve more water, usually processed through your eyes. This is sadness doing its job when we're breathing out like this. And the gift of sadness is that we're coming back into flow. So sadness is a system that helps us let go of things. And coming back to the intensity, right? We're working on the low conscious, unconscious level of sadness. I'm not expecting you to be really sad right now. I am not. And we're also using a specific feature of our emotional system to our advantage here, which is it's kind of bidirectional. When I am really sad and I go like, right, then the sadness is triggering the breathing out and the sigh. What I can do, and this works for all emotions, I can trigger the emotion back by using the physical expression. You will also notice, for instance, when you beat something, you will get angry, right? When you jump up and down and dance, you will feel joy. So the things that our body does when we feel an emotion, when we do them, we also kind of instigate that emotional feeling that is connected to that. And we're using that to our advantage here. So I'm using the breathing out to get back into flow, to release something, to let go of something, and that gets me back into flow. Obviously, at some point, we're also going to breathe in, right? Can't keep breathing out all the time. So what emotion can we connect breathing in to? And there are several ones. I'm using a very specific one, and I'm coming back to my idea of a lion walking into my room. So if a lion would actually now walk into my room, I would do something like, So again, I'm using my voice. I'm also breathing in. I'm also, you can't see me right now because you're looking at the slides, but I'm raising my arms and standing up. And what does this do? This connects me to the here and now, because this is where I need to be when a lion is coming at me, right? I don't want to think about yesterday or about tomorrow or about you guys in front of the screens. I'm thinking about that lion. I'm thinking about here and now. That's my problem. And the gift that emotion gives me is fear connects me to my intuition. It gives me focus, it gives me presence, and it connects me to my intuition. So what we can do now is we can connect our breathing. And I don't want you to do that all day, not every out breath and in breath. Like, oh my God, just sometimes, occasionally, maybe when you grab a door handle to open a door and go into a meeting. When you grab the door handle, you breathe out and you use that out breath to let go consciously of all the things you won't need in that meeting, everything that was before, maybe the last meeting. And then you open the door, you breathe in, and you set your intention for the meeting you're going in. So you increase your presence by breathing in, and you let go of whatever was before by breathing out. You can do that with door handles. You can do that when you take a sip from your glass or your coffee. Let go of something that was on your mind. Breathe in, refocus. You can also do that when you click the Zoom button, or when you start a YouTube video, when you join a Google meeting, whatever you do, whenever you have a context switch, you can build a habit of breathing out, breathing in. That has lots of benefits, even if you do that just a few times, let's say 5 times a day. But if you do that every day, you'll be more present, you'll be more focused, you carry around less emotional baggage or any other baggage, and you'll be more in flow, and you'll be more effective. You increase the presence of people in the meetings you're in, and that is a great thing to have. So coming to a next pair, and I want to come back to, before we do that, I want to come back to the intensity thing, just to remind you, and especially as you currently can't ask me any questions, I'm not talking about being afraid. I'm not talking about being sad. I'm talking about using the emotional system of sadness, using the emotional system of fear in order to, A, increase my conscious awareness of these emotions. I'm becoming aware of what I'm letting go. I'm becoming aware of what I confront. I'm becoming aware of what I focus on, so that I'm more present in my life and more intentional, more context aware, etc. And I'm also improving my emotional agility. I'm understanding the emotion, that's the emotional literacy. And by engaging actively in the emotion when it's at this low level, I'm kind of training my muscle to dealing better with this emotion when stakes are higher, when I'm actually sad, when I'm actually afraid. I hope that makes sense. And we'll explore that with the next 2 emotions that I want to give you today. And both of these emotions they're absolutely essential for our day-to-day lives, to navigate relationships. They're especially important if you are in any kind of leadership capacity, if you sometimes take responsibility for other people as well, be it in a project, in a family, in an organization, as a boss, whatever that is. And there are 2 ways that boundaries can be broken, or that boundaries can be violated. One is I can violate boundaries. When I'm driving in traffic, there's a speed limit. I'm going a little over the speed limit. I'm violating a boundary. For instance, I'm stepping into an elevator that is a little too small. It says 4 people, but actually there's 1 person in it. I'm stepping into the elevator. I feel a little shame. Shame is the emotion that is guarding me crossing my boundaries or crossing someone else's boundary. And then there's the opposite. There's other people are crossing my boundaries. And that's what anger is there for. Anger is guarding my boundaries from other people, crossing them. Anger is the emotion that gives us the most power. Anger is also a very directive emotion. You might have seen athletes before they do a race, they will pump themselves up with anger, or some tennis players have been very famous for whenever they hit the ball. That's using the power of anger to your advantage. But the main reason for anger is anger comes up when boundaries are violated. So coming back to the elevator example, when I'm stepping into the elevator and other people are there, I'm stepping into their personal space, and that triggers my shame. Just put yourself into the other people's shoes. You are standing in the elevator, you're peaceful on your way out of the building after work, and you want to get home. And halfway down, the elevator stops, opens, somebody else enters your space, and a little anger comes up. It's not big, and it's socially totally acceptable, right? We are used to using elevators. That's not a big deal, but it's just a good example of feeling what these emotions mean and how they arise in our system, especially with something as simple as our physical space that kind of surrounds our bodies at arm's length. So we have these two emotions, and why are they so important? Both have the same effect when ignored, that we build up emotional baggage. If I continuously ignore the boundaries that I set for myself, that I believe in, I build up regret. So if I ignore shame, I build up regret, and regret is something really heavy and hard to carry around, also not very healthy, can get on your stomach too, etc. And when I ignore anger, when I let other people violate my boundaries, when I let other people roll over me, disrespect me, disempower me, dismiss me, discriminate against me, I not only lose my power, I lose my belief in myself, I also build up resentment. And resentment is equally heavy and unhealthy to carry as regret. So shame and anger are the emotional sentries of the soul. Similar to some other things I said, this is a quote from Carla McLaren. Her book is on the last slide. It's called The Language of Emotions. If this stuff is interesting to you, that's one very recommended read. So another way this is important when we are working, especially when we are leaders, is that we need kind of more emotional, struggling for a good word here. Our emotions need to work not just for ourselves, but also for others. Example, when I'm leading a workshop, we usually make agreements at the beginning, how we want to be with each other, how we want to treat each other, how we want to respect each other, for instance, and stuff like that. Nonviolent communication, whatever, people agree. As I am the leader of the workshop, I am then responsible for reminding the group and reminding individuals in the group that these are our rules. So when they violate them, I need to tell them. That means my shame needs to be evolved enough, developed enough, that it doesn't only catch me stepping over boundaries, but that it also catches other people in my tribe, in my group, stepping over our boundaries. So my shame needs to work not only for me, but also for other people. And it's exactly the same for anger. If my anger usually works for somebody violating me, violating my space, violating my pride, violating my integrity, violating my value as a human being. But if I'm the leader of a group and I take responsibility for more people, I also need to protect these people, and they expect that from their leader. So my anger also needs to be strong enough when somebody comes in to say, stop, this is our space, you can't come in here. So these are both emotions that are highly important to develop, to understand, and to be able to use wisely as a leader, because they both have a bad rep, and with a reason. Shame can go wildly wrong. Anger can go wildly wrong. So the way that we deal with shame and anger is very often violent and lots of other bad things. But that's not shame or anger's fault, it's the way we deal with them, right? Coming back to what I said in the beginning, when I talked about the intensity, and I said the intensity of feeling is not the intensity of expression. That's a different thing, right? So I want to intensely feel shame when I violate, or somebody in my family, somebody in my group, somebody in my team violates a boundary that we agree to hold. I also want to feel anger, notice my anger, be aware of my anger intensively when something bad happens to me or to us. Absolutely. The way I deal with it, totally different story. Obviously, we want to be respectful, nonviolent, unless that doesn't work anymore. But we want to use the emotions to our advantage. We don't want to ignore them, because especially with these two, that can be leading to bad consequences. Okay, I'm coming to some takeaways. I've said a lot of things that were not on the slides, and I wanted to have one slide that you can kind of keep just taking notes. So take a screenshot. I also put these on SlideShare after the talk so that you can find them there. Emotions have an evolutionary purpose. They were not invented by someone higher being to embarrass us. Each emotion draws our attention to something, maybe important and maybe not important, but it's significant at that moment in time. The emotion is telling us something. It's usually better to pay some attention to it and then decide with your conscious mind what you want to do about it. Emotions are always true. They're not always right. I explained that before. The intensity of feeling and the intensity of expression are not the same. One very important thing, anyone who has studied nonviolent communication knows that I am responsible for my emotions. Don't make other people responsible for your emotions. If you are late to my show and I'm angry, that's not your fault, right? You can't make me angry. You can do something and I can interpret that in a way that I become angry, but my anger is my responsibility, and the way I deal with it is my responsibility. So I'm responsible for my emotions and my actions. Leaders take responsibility for others. I just made that point. So your emotional awareness and your strength of your boundaries need to be appropriate to be able to be strong as a leader. And yeah, my advice, practice your emotional literacy, understanding emotions, what they're for, understanding the spectrum and the different kinds of emotions, and your emotional agility. So your ability to move into and out of emotions, to move through emotions quickly, to improve your relationships, which then means you're improving your leadership, you're improving your organizational culture and everything that's built from a network of relationships. And you also improve your health and happiness. Here you have everything together on one chart. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, Jelena?
Yes, Olaf, there are several questions.
Great.
Okay. We will try to answer as much as we can till the end of the session. So let's start with the first one that says, how to handle situations and people with overexpressed emotions in the work environment.
Calmly is probably the first thing, and that doesn't mean you stay calm forever, but when you first deal with the overexpression of emotion, you stay calm. In my trainings, we always have an N-1 rule. One person in the room can lose their calm at any point in time. The others need to stay calm, then we can deal with it and learn from it and maybe work through the tension. Also help them calm down and learn whatever's needed for them to calm down. A person who is in a strong emotional state is not in any state of learning. So they won't be able to listen closely or attentively to what you're saying. They will not be able to learn anything new about the situation. So first thing you need to do is calm them down. And that means take a break, get fresh air in, take a breath, as I said, let go, right? Breathing out is a good way of letting go of other emotions as well. And then as soon as you can, get into a conversation, find out what's wrong, be curious. Try not to take it personally, but be curious about their experience and understand it. And that will hopefully lead to some way of improving the situation. If somebody is continually again and again and again without any change, although you try, over expressing emotions in a way that is not okay in your workplace, you need to set a boundary. And that might mean if you continue being like that with us, communicating like that with us, we can't work together anymore. So that's a kind of anger, right? Setting a boundary and being clear about that and being compassionate. Separating the, I like you, you are a valuable human being, but your behavior is not okay. That is usually a good way to deal with really difficult situations.
Okay, before I go to the next question, I can see that you still have your screen shared with us. Perhaps you can just stop sharing so that people can see you when you answer the questions.
Great, absolutely,
Good,
sure.
Thanks. Okay, so the next question is Gordana wants to know if there are any books on this topic that you can recommend. She wants to learn more about this.
Yeah, the first that I would read is The Language of Emotions by Carla McLaren. That was the on the flip chart on the last slide. I can also share a link on Matchabout after the call. Carla has a YouTube channel as well. So if you want to check out if the way she thinks about this, the way she talks about this is your thing, you can look her up on YouTube and watch a few videos and see if that works for you. There are so many books about emotions that it's difficult to point to a specific one. I think the second one I would recommend is probably any book by Dan Siegel. He's written a book called Mindsight, which is a lot about emotions and also a lot of other brain science. There's a teenager version called Brainstorm of that same book. So if you are dealing with teenagers and their emotionality, that might be a good thing to read with them. This would be my first and most important literature tips.
Okay, good. So you said once that everybody has a leader within themselves. And what Jelena wants to know is what are the tricks for developing the leader within ourselves?
Huh. That's a big one. I think I would probably phrase it differently now. I remember saying that, but I would probably just say now we all are leaders. We just don't always recognize it. We have this word in our language everywhere, like we're leading our lives, we're leading a marriage, we're leading a project. It's not just at work that we use the word leading. The working definition that I use in my courses is make a difference with intention. So leadership is making a difference with intention. It's not the best definition of leadership, but it's a working definition. So you can pick all those terms and work on them separately. So you improve your leadership when you clarify your intention more often. Like, unfortunately, knowing what we want is not a school subject, so we don't learn how to do that in school. But reflecting on what you want, what I said earlier about coming into a meeting and preparing yourself, setting your intention for the meeting. What do I want to get out of it? How would I know this was a successful meeting? If you do that for the things you do during the day, and this could be, doesn't have to be a meeting, it could be a meal, right? What does make this breakfast successful for me? Obviously they get food, but maybe something else. What makes the evening successful for me? How will I know tomorrow that I've had a successful night's sleep? So setting your intention and making that a habit. And then also, whenever you do something, notice the impact, notice the difference you're making. And I think great leaders are mostly aware of their intentions. They're often aware of the impact they're making, and their impact often matches their intentions. That's why they're great leaders. So this is basically what I would do. Whenever you enter a context, become aware of where you are, what you want, what it means to you, and notice the difference you're making. I hope that makes sense as a 1 or 2 minute explanation.
Yeah. So the next question asked Darko. He asked if we can really talk about emotions with someone if we didn't previously establish a full relationship going on already.
Depends on what you call full. I don't think we need to establish a lot of a relationship. Obviously, there needs to be some relationship, but there needs to be some relationship for any conversation to happen. So I think it depends on how you want to approach it. So if somebody's behaving in a way that you find wrong, so it triggers emotions, and you don't know them at all, then approaching them with a conversation about the emotions is probably not the widest move. But if you know someone, like a colleague at work, or if you want to make this a topic of conversation in your team, just starting a conversation with, I got interested in the topic of emotions recently. Is anybody else interested in having a conversation about that? Something like this. Or with a friend, have you ever reflected on emotions, what kind of role they play in your life? Like, I'm making up stuff now, obviously, but I don't think you need a strong relationship to be able to talk about this.
Okay, so do you think that a manager treats and handles emotions the same way that leader does?
It's a weird question because I'm not sure of the definition. So leader to me is a more general term. I would say everybody can be a leader. That's a matter of choice, kind of like deliberately making a difference, deliberately having an influence somewhere. Where manager usually is more of a position and role and something that's explicit. And a manager is kind of required to lead. A manager is required to make a difference to someone else's work, right? Because they're managing the work. So I would say, as long as you're, unless you are managing something that does not involve human beings, which, like, I don't know, if you are a systems manager and the system doesn't have human beings in it, then you probably don't need a lot of emotions. But if you are dealing with a system that has human beings in it, you will have emotions, and you will need to understand them, and you will need to understand your own emotions, because when your own emotions get the better of you, you can't self-manage anymore. And if you can't manage yourself, you can't manage anyone else. So I don't think it matters if you are a manager or a leader. I think if you are dealing with human beings in a way that is useful, helpful, successful, you need to have some level of understanding of your own emotions and the other people's emotions. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, and the last one is, what is the hardest thing you need to do when you want to confront your emotions?
Be honest. So, for instance, one context in which that is hard for me, and it's not hard every day, but it is hard again and again and again, is in my personal relationship, my love relationship, because you in a close relationship, when you're living together, you can't help that at some point there is going to be a tension. There's going to be some misunderstanding. There's going to be some difference in, you want that, they want something else, whatever. There's bound to be some tension at some point. And then our obvious first choice is to go into, they are wrong, I am right. And why, I don't know. Let's say you want to go for a walk, they want to go to bed, whatever, right? Why is she always so tired? Like that's the first thing that our brain does, because it's so cheap and easy, blaming others. If you haven't heard of this, I'm kind of using the responsibility process by Christopher Avery for this. And then there's justification and whatnot. And then at some point you have shame, which is the point where you realize that you are part of the problem. like you're blaming someone with your finger pointed at them or at something, and then you realize that 3 of your fingers are pointing at the real problem. And that's when shame sets in, when I go like, oh, wow. And sometimes that's really hard when you realize you have emotions that you don't really want to have. For instance, when you feel envy at someone that you think you shouldn't be envious of, or when you've broken a rule in some way and you didn't really notice it, but in hindsight, you know that you didn't live up to your own standards and that you behaved in a way that felt okay at the time, but when you look back on it, it wasn't. So it's difficult when confronting yourself. And this is a nice segue to, I didn't make any link to agility or Scrum before so far, but this confrontation thing is key to accountability. And without accountability, systems don't work well and don't work effectively. And Agile does not include a good accountability system. And what we need to do as human beings, we need to be able to confront ourselves when we did something wrong. We need to tell someone else, hey, I did something wrong. So I need to look into the mirror and say, shit, I didn't deliver what I promised yesterday. I need to be able to look my colleague in the face and say, shit, sorry, I didn't deliver what I promised yesterday. And I also, and this is again 10x harder, I need to look them in the face and say, hey, Peter, you didn't deliver what you promised yesterday. And that's the hardest thing. And unless we build a culture of that ability to confront, and I mean confront in a purely, not in any violent kind of way, right? Or in a dismissive kind of way, just to confront reality. If we don't learn that, we never reach high performance in any teamwork or in our organization, because we can't rely on each other and we can't tell each other that we can't rely on each other. And that leads to lots of shitty emotional stuff.
Okay, so as I said at the beginning, a very tough subject because it's very hard for people to deal with themselves in the first place and then with everyone else. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope this was helpful. And
yeah, it was.
Reach out on LinkedIn or on Matchabout, or you'll find me wherever. And
Great.
I'm probably going to be back in Belgrade for leadership training as soon as
I hope so.
COVID
we
nightmare
haven't seen each other.
over.
Yeah, we haven't seen each other in a while. I mean, in person. So it would have been nice to work in person again. So thanks again. I'm sure this is one of the topics that we will think about more. Maybe this is one of the things that we should leave this day with as a sentiment and as something to think about in the future. And it's also a wonderful way to finish the first day of our gathering. So thank you again very much, and talk to you soon. Okay.
See you tomorrow.
See you. Bye.